coming back to precious metals, the only way in which you can get out of this situation of currencies really in the early stages of a state of collapse is by having physical gold and silver. The beginnings of a realization that things aren't sort of quite as we might hope to be. I mean, we've got this persistence of price rises, as you pointed out, things like petrol. I mean, in Europe, we've got real problems with gas supplies. We're having to turn to Mr. Putin for salvation, and there's a big reluctance to do that amongst some of the Europeans. The problem, I think, with inflation is that people think inflation is just rising prices. It is actually the result of inflation. Inflation is something that happens earlier, and it happens to money, and it happens specifically to currency. When you expand the quantity of currency dramatically, then what you will find is that it affects its purchasing power down the road. And down the road can be anything, between sort of weeks and months and maybe even a year or two. The effect of that basically is reflected in rising prices for everything. And this is really what we're waking up to. I mean, we have seen a massive expansion of central bank money since 2008. I mean, if you look at the combined balance sheets of the Bank of China, the Bank of Japan, the Fed, the ECB and the Bank of England, their balance sheets have expanded by over 600%. Yeah. And of that expansion, the bulk of it has been in the last 18 months. I mean, it's just literally taken off. There is another aspect to the valuation of currencies in terms of their purchasing power, and that is the confidence which its users have in its purchasing power. And at its extreme, if you lose confidence in a currency's purchasing power, then you hold no currency reserve and you have everything in goods and services. So at that point, the purchasing power of a currency is zero. It's lost it all. The other way, if people become convinced that the purchasing power of a currency rises, then what they'll tend to do is they'll tend to hoard currency rather than go and buy goods. And the result is that the purchasing power of the currency rises. So what we're looking at is a change in utility, a change in valuation, if you like, for a currency, depending on our human behavior, driven by what we expect in the future. So the reason for me mentioning this is that they could stop printing tomorrow. Well, let's assume they stop printing tomorrow, but the effect on the purchasing power of the currency isn't necessarily to suddenly make the currency stop in its tracks in terms of losing purchasing power. It may be. I mean, one would expect some effect. The problem is that if we get to the stage where this is likely to happen, it will be because people have fully woken up to what is going on with currencies, and they will understand that it's currencies going down, not prices going up. I think that is the key. When people understand that, then there is no hope for currency. There really isn't. The only thing that the authorities can do is to tie their fiat currencies to a metallic standard, gold or silver. Obviously, gold would be the one in which they go for, because central banks have gold reserves. That is the only thing, once currencies really start losing their public credibility, that will stop it sliding. If they stop printing now, then they would stabilize the currencies. Of that, I have no doubt whatsoever, because very few people actually understand the link between all the money printing that's been happening and the effect on prices today. In other words, if you stop printing money, they would suddenly things would tighten, if you like, in terms of, what we do. We would find that the other side of stopping printing money is no more furlough schemes, no more unemployment schemes, no more supporting bust companies, no more supporting banks who have become insolvent, and so on and so on. So actually what would happen is that the currency crisis would be replaced by a different crisis. And that crisis would be one of a very deep economic slump. The problem was that when the stock started failing, he had to increase the production of the livre. The purchasing power of the livre went down, and it eventually collapsed in the second half of 1720. That's exactly the situation we have today. So we're leading to a situation where asset inflation, if you like, at the behest of the Fed, is going to just undermine the purchasing power of the currency. The other way in which it undermines the purchasing power of the currency is that the government, the federal government, raises money in the bond markets at super cheap rates, interest rates, and the institutions buy these, and the banks buy these bonds, and then that money goes into the general account held at the Fed. It's drawn down and then spent. I mean, we've had helicopter money, we've now got new infrastructure plans and all the rest of it. Some of the more wilder figures have been jumped on by the system. So we're not going to get that sort of 5 trillion expansion of infrastructure spending. I mean, that's reduced down to 1 or 1 and a bit or so, 1.5. But, nonetheless, that extra spending undermines the purchasing power of the dollar in the domestic economy. But they're all doing this. All the big banks, all the big central banks are doing this. So, yes, we have inflation, but what you're referring to, Darryl, about petrol prices and all the rest of it, is the symptoms of inflation. The real inflation has occurred and is continuing to occur, because the other thing about increasing the quantity of money and debasing it is that in order to get the same effect in terms of government, the transfer of wealth from the private sector to the government, it's got to do it at an increased pace to keep the same, if you like, wealth effect flowing into the government coffers. And so we're on a hyperinflationary spiral. I mean, there is no doubt about that. And I don't think anyone can argue against that. So what does this mean for prices from here? It means that the notion that it's transient, which is, what all the central banks, all the major central banks are trying to convince us, the idea it's transient is completely wrong. There is a lot more in the pipeline from previous monetary expansion. And energy is just central to everything. And I just find it extraordinary that, you have this thing in Glasgow where, COP26, everybody turns up and they all say, well, we've got to do away with fossil fuels and coal and all the rest of it, not actually realizing that, the prices are going through the roof. And the reason they're going through the roof is not because necessarily you and I are demanding it, but because what we price it in is being debased. But at the same time, we still need the energy. I mean, it's all very well saying that, by 2030 or something, we'll be carbon neutral. But I mean, I tell you what, it's getting cold in Northern Europe now. This is not a 2030 problem for ordinary people. This is actually very, very serious. Without a commensurate increase in demand for that money. I mean, so its purchasing power just goes down. And that's actually what we're facing at the moment, Darryl. And coming back to precious metals, the only way in which you can get out of this situation of currencies really in the early stages of a state of collapse is by having physical gold and silver. And some of that, I think, you should have in coin because you will spend it. This is not something that you buy in order to make a profit, to spin a profit. I mean, it's in the early days, it's very nice when you're sitting on gold and silver and you see the price rising. You think, oh, I'm worth a bit more today, But what you're doing is you're valuing it in debasing fiat. That is not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to protect you from a collapse in fiat currencies, and that basically is what we're seeing with prices in the precious metals markets at the moment.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
Do you want to know one thing about crypto? I made over 3,000% in profit in a few weeks. Fact is, the traditional financial system, the traditional money system makes you poor, not rich. If you want to earn $500,000, $1 million, you have to wait until you're 50, 60, 70 in the traditional financial system, and you probably will still be broke. And you will be old. This is not a sexy combination, as you can imagine. But the question is, how can you start in crypto and make these profits? Where to invest? Where to start? My name is Gunnar and I'm from Germany, as you can hear, and things are a little bit different in Germany. More about that later on. Fact is, there are lots of different cryptocurrencies. It's a gigantic universe where beginners and professionals get easily lost. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. There are 7 key steps you need to follow to become successful in this market. You have to know them, and if you fail one of them, it's literally impossible to succeed in this market. Just an example, one of the key points is your exchange, and one of the biggest are, for example, Binance and Coinbase. These are trusted and well-established exchanges, but, and this is a big but, you won't find the super profitable coins on those exchanges. The unknown super profitable coins that get gigantic profits are not traded on those kind of exchanges. They are traded on much smaller insider platforms that are barely known. And I can tell you what those super secret exchanges are and why they are so profitable. And another super important thing are the right information sources. The point is, the internet is gigantic. There are hundreds and hundreds of YouTube channels, blogs, pages, and much more. And there are also market makers and influencers. For example, Elon Musk, he is not a crypto guy, but the moment he recommended Dogecoin, it went through the roof, to the moon, so to say. But why did he recommend it? Where did he hear it from? He didn't hear it from newspapers. And believe me, he is listening to someone. But you have to know who, and you have to react before he is reacting. This is really important. And these are only 2 of the 7 steps you have to follow in order to be successful in crypto. And if you want to know all of these steps in much more detail, and if you want to have a comprehensive checklist, here's what you should do. There is a link below this video. Click on this link and you will get the opportunity to subscribe to my channel. Click on the link and you will see a video where I explain the next steps. So see you soon. Click on the link now. I'll see you there.